As soon as Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney was officially elected, a glimmer of hope emerged for U.S.-Canada relations. Both nations had expressed interest in drafting a new economic and security deal. Carney pledged to set an agenda to negotiate or renegotiate trade ties and also explore ways to reduce tariffs. But that optimism quickly soured. In response to Ottawa's decision to impose a digital services tax on U.S. tech giants, U.S. President Donald Trump abruptly declared that he was terminating all discussions on trade with Canada. The announcement came just as Trump touted a major trade deal with China, with more countries lining up, leaving Canada out in the cold. With tensions rising, how will Carney, who once promised to stand up to Trump's threats to turn Canada into the 51st state, actually navigate this diplomatic blow? And what might this standoff mean for the future of U.S.-Canada relations? That will be our discussion today on In Depth, where we will try to provide some answers. I'm Hala Al-Hamalawi. Stay tuned. Since Mark Carney replaced Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister, U.S.-Canada relations seem to be improving after Trump's tariffs and 51st state comments. As reported by Bloomberg, at last week's G7 summit in Alberta, Carney called for a new trade and security deal by mid-July, and Trump even called him a nice gentleman. But the momentum stalled when Trump announced that he will terminate trade talks and impose new tariffs in response to Canada's 3% digital services tax, which mainly targets U.S. tech firms. Bloomberg noted that the announcement caught markets off guard, causing the Canadian dollar and trade-sensitive stocks to drop. Trump declared, "Economically, we have such power over Canada." The tax passed before Carney entered politics, is hated by the White House and Silicon Valley for being discriminatory. Despite this, Carney government pushed ahead with the first payment due on Monday. Bloomberg, meanwhile, added that this latest move disrupts ongoing efforts to finalize a trade deal by mid-July. Donald Trump may have done Canada a favor. His sweeping tariffs and threats to annex Canada have pushed Ottawa to tackle internal trade barriers that cost the economy billions, according to the Financial Times. The reform, called an economic renaissance by economists, aims to remove quotas, taxes, and conflicting standards, blocking the free flow of goods and labor across provinces and territories. According to the Financial Times, Trump's recent halt to trade talks over Canada's tech tax and threat to impose new tariffs adds urgency to the reform, a key part of Prime Minister Mark Carney's plan to build the strongest G7 economy and shield Canada from U.S. tariffs. Given that over 75% of Canadian trade is with the United States, the Financial Times added that strengthening internal trade is key to offsetting tariff losses. Delving more into this, joins us from Washington, Ginger Chapman, a lawyer and political analyst, and Peter Qnews, founder and chairman of Links Investment Advisory. Welcome to Qnews, and I would start with you, Mr. Peter. Now, as both leaders had set a 30-day deadline for a trade deal during the G7 meeting, how will Trump's termination of talks with Canada affect that timeline? And also, do you think that Trump made the right decision by suspending negotiations?
Yes, nice to be with you, Hala.
Always a pleasure.
This will have a pretty major effect, but to put it in perspective, understand how this dispute came about. Canada and a bunch of other countries have imposed a tax on digital services from big companies like Google, Amazon, Uber, and others. And note that all these companies are American, and some of these companies don't even have a presence in Canada. And then to add insult to injury, they made the tax retroactive to 2022 for a
Oh,
total of about $2 billion of taxes on these American companies. So it's not surprising that President Trump is upset about this. And I can tell you that Canadian companies are also upset about it because the tariffs that the United States will impose will have a much greater effect on Canada than anything Canada can do to the US.
so that's a very strange decision that I would like to understand from you. But I will go to Mrs. Ginger. Now, having pledged to set an agenda to renegotiate trade deals or trade ties with Washington, what political risks does Mark Carney face domestically by standing firm against Trump's aggressive trade stance?
Yes. Well, first, thank you for having us today,
Always a
Hala, and
pleasure.
greetings to your viewers and your other guests. And right now, the risk for Mark Carney in Canada is perhaps not as great as the risk for Donald Trump here in America, because Mark Carney may be perceived as standing up for Canadians and looking out for the economic interests of Canada. However, as your other guest mentioned, Canadian companies are also opposed to this digital services tax. And indeed, this is a highly controversial tax because many countries have been trying for decades to figure out how to tax the internet, electronic services, social media platforms, online marketplaces, and most importantly, the sale or license of user data, which, as we know, is an incredibly large source of revenue for these countries. And it's estimated the tax, including the retroactive portion going back to 2022, actually could be as high as $3 billion.
Wow.
And as we've seen from Trump's reaction, he appears to be rightfully upset because Trump's perception was negotiations were continuing along, and we believed that the enforcement of this tax might be delayed for at least 30 days while negotiations were continuing. And for Carney to say, no, this tax is going to be imposed June 30th, Monday morning. So this happens on a Friday. This $3 billion tax is levied on a Monday, and Trump is rightfully outraged, makes the statements in Truth on his Truth Social. He's terminating all negotiation. We have all the cards. Canada is foolish to do this. And indeed, Trump is feeling the heat because this weekend is also when the Senate had their vote on proceeding with Trump's big, beautiful bill. It was in trouble because of resistance from Republicans. J.D. Vance had to go to the Senate on Saturday to, in case he had to cast a tie-breaking vote. Trump is having difficulty corralling all of the Republicans on the same page. And of course, all of this is happening against the broader backdrop of the wars in Iran and Ukraine. So this kind of blindsided Trump, and he is reacting to the specific tariff deal and also to other economic considerations that are a holdover from the Biden administration. Janet Yellen, our previous Secretary of Treasury, did leave some time bombs for Trump in his second term, including her use of short-term high interest rates to roll over short-term debt. This is something that's coming up. And in addition, Trump is also battling European countries who also want to impose this digital services tax, which does disproportionately affect American companies.
Of course.
So we have France, the UK, Spain, Italy, and also the global trade the name of our global trade organization, it escapes me at this moment. However, they are working on a framework for a global digital services tax, which once again, the United States is resistant to. And Canada was supposed to wait until there was a global services tax, digital services tax framework in place. However, this is incredibly difficult to tax.
It's difficult and complex indeed. And I want to go back to you, Mr. Peter. Now, Trump said, and I quote, "Economically, the U.S. has such power over Canada." In your view, what economic leverage does the United States hold over Canada, and how might Canada respond to balance this power?
I think Trump is right about this one. Here, let's go through it. I think Mark Carney is in a much weaker position. For example, 2/3 of Canada's imports of vegetables come from the US.
Okay.
1/3 of Canada's imports of fruit come from the US.
Yes.
So what is he going to do? Is he going to reciprocate by putting a high tax on imports of vegetables? You can imagine how that would go over with the Canadian people. The US imports from Canada a great deal of electricity, also oil we import. But the United States is self-sufficient in oil. The oil we produce, the shale oil, costs more than the imports from Canada, but it's something we can live with. So when Trump says that we have the advantage, I'm pretty sure he's right.
Mrs. Ginger, now given Trump's past rhetoric about Canada becoming the 51st state, could this recent move be represented or interpreted as a strategic attempt to pressure Canada on political issues beyond trade?
Yes, and this political issue appears to be overriding the economic considerations. As your other guest pointed out, the United States, we export about 450 billion, 440 billion in goods to Canada. We import about 314 billion. So they rely a lot more on our imports. We do get energy from Canada. However, as we have seen when Trump first took office, his statements about Canada becoming our 51st state, and also more importantly about, we do have designs on Greenland because of all of the international activity happening in the Arctic Circle. Canada is a much larger part of Trump's grand defense plans. We all remember his Golden Dome, our air defense and national air defense system, which we do need Canada for the over-the-horizon missiles that may come from the Arctic Circle. And indeed, this Golden Dome, the Greenland, Canada, the Arctic Circle, this also comes down to economic concerns, economic hegemony, more so than national security.
This is a very interesting point or dimension that I don't believe many people knew about. Thank you for raising this point.
Well,
yes.
So we do need Canada for our national security ambitions and goals. And this economic dispute is a bump in the road for Carney. It's very important that he appears to be standing up to Trump in front of his own Canadian people. However, there is the risk for both countries of escalating trade wars. We've seen Trump has already said he's going to impose 50% tariffs. Carney has already responded by increasing tariffs on U.S. steel by 50%, anything over our U.S.-Canada-Mexico treaty. So the trade wars have already started. They already appear to be escalating, and Trump is going to have to deal with this as well as Iran, Ukraine, China. So this trade war with Canada has the potential to escalate at a time where Trump already has a great deal on his plate.
Mr. Peter, in your own opinion, why has Canada's 3% digital services tax become such a major sticking point in trade talks with the United States?
Well, Hala, as I mentioned, the fact is that this is an imposition of taxes on large American digital companies, and one can argue that it's pretty one-sided. And as I mentioned earlier, making it retroactive to 2022 added real insult to injury.
Yes.
And the amount, as our other guests pointed out, could be as high as three billion. So he's going to fight that, and he should fight that. I would also say this will be resolved. It'll probably be resolved very soon. But I can tell you that it's Mark Carney who's going to cave, not President Trump. And there will be some diplomatic resolution within the trade resolution. But at the end of the day, the U.S. position is likely to
So you're saying that there will be compromise, particularly from Carney's side?
It'll look like a compromise.
Looks like that. Okay.
It'll look like a compromise.
Okay, it will look like a compromise. Mrs. Ginger, with Carney now facing a significant challenge, and we mentioned that he has a challenge domestically as well, how does Trump's suspension of trade talks impact Canada's diplomatic strategy moving forward?
Yes, well, one thing we have seen with many other countries is their diplomatic strategy tends to crumble in the face of Trump's belligerence, loud, provocative statements, and indeed, Trump tends to dominate many, if not most, negotiations. So I do agree with your other guest that there will be intensive negotiations. However, Canada is, they are our northern neighbor. We do need good relations with them moving forward. So we will reach a compromise. It will be difficult for Mark Carney because he does have more resistance amongst Canadians. Indeed, we do see some provinces of Canada, Alberta, Saskatchewan. These are Canada's oil producing, more politically conservative provinces, and they are saying that they would like to secede from Canada and perhaps even join the United States. And they are using this as leverage against Mark Carney in order to improve Canada's own domestic energy production laws. The oil industry in Canada feels like they are maligned and they are overtaxed because of the whole green energy trend. So the oil producing Alberta, Saskatchewan provinces of Canada will use their alliance with the United States as leverage against Carney. We see Canadian businesses, the Chamber of Commerce, their business associations are also pressuring Carney to remove this tax. And indeed, we may be entering a time where many countries are trying to increase tariffs and taxes. So there is the risk of escalating global trade wars. However, in the end, I do believe all of these countries will negotiate, and we are seeing an end to the post-World War II Bretton Woods financial, military, economic models. And with Trump over the next 4 years, we are going to see a new I don't want to say a new paradigm, but we are going to see new trade deals negotiated And internet services, digital services, these are a very critical part of our economy, and countries are struggling with how to tax them, how to regulate them.
Yes.
This is a new frontier.
Yes, and I would like to further discuss the digital services tax with you, Mr. Peter. Now, to what extent does the digital services tax dispute reflect broader global tensions over taxing digital giants?
The problem with the digital services tax is that it is a tax pretty exclusively on large American companies. So you can imagine that it doesn't get a great reception around here. The fact is that many of these companies don't even have presences in the countries that are trying to tax them. So
Okay.
there probably will be a compromise here with some sort of payment
So
because
smaller companies are not subject to this type of tax, the digital tax?
sure they are. Well, the point is that it's a tax on the companies. It's the companies that are paying it. These billions of dollars we're talking about are being paid by Google and Uber and Meta and Amazon and as I point out, all of these companies are American companies, so there's no reciprocal issue here.
Yes.
Yes, they're digital, and of course the other side of the argument is, well, they're making money digitally in our countries. Well, maybe, but there's going to have to be a lot of discussion about how that happens.
Yeah, there's a lot of argument in this regard, I understand. Mrs. Ginger, what are the potential long-term effects on U.S.-Canada security cooperation if trade relations continue to deteriorate? Because you mentioned an interesting point, which is the security point.
And the security is a very important issue. I would like to add to what our other guests said. The presence test is a very important tax test. And what that means is really if I sell shoes in Canada and I sell shoes in America, America taxes me on the shoes I sell here. Canada only taxes me on the shoes I sell in Canada. What's dangerous about the digital service tax, it's on total revenue. It taxes these companies on revenue they make in America, in Canada, in Europe, and it's before expenses. It's not a tax on profits, it's on gross revenue. Everything they earn all over the world will be taxed by Canada at a rate of 3%. So there is an element. That's why this is unprecedented. It flies in the face. It opposes all of our normal tax rules where a company has to be present in a jurisdiction before they are taxed by that jurisdiction. So this creates a lot of legal global uncertainty for tax and trade practices in itself. And then for the security arrangements, well, we have seen how trade and tariff wars and the economic disruption, this was what caused the Great Depression of the 1930s. All countries around the world suffered. Tying this in with our national security and our greater economic ambitions, not only is the Arctic Circle and Greenland very important for our national security protection and the possibility of a golden dome to protect our airspace, but the Arctic Circle is becoming a major economic powerhouse, not just due to increased shipping trade, but also Russia is dominating the shipping channels in the Arctic Circle. They're signing contracts to allow container and cargo ships to take shortcuts through Russia's shipping channels. And this is something that alarms the United States, not just because of antagonism, but because of our own reliance on shipping and our own maritime power. The United States is a large maritime and naval power. This directly challenges our authority on the high seas. And more importantly, if we can control the economic resources in the Arctic, in Canada, oil and gas, in Greenland, they also have natural resources. And as we're trying to get control over more mining, more rare earth minerals. For this, we do need the Arctic Circle. We do need Greenland, and we do need to have positive trade relations as well as security arrangements with Canada. So
I
this
get your
digital
point.
services tax ties in with the larger
Yes.
economic issues which Trump is disrupting right now.
Yes, I get your point. That was Mrs. Ginger Chapman, lawyer and political analyst. Thank you so much. And Mr. Peter Qnews, founder and chairman of Links Investment Advisory. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank you both for sharing your fruitful insights with us today. And this concludes today's episode of In Depth. I'm Hala Al-Hamalawi. Thank you so much for joining us. And stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.